The massive alien ship hung in Earth's sky like a dark moon. Its black metal surface swallowed sunlight. Strange blue lights pulsed along its sides. Captain Rick Martinez stood at the large window of the United Earth Defense Station and stared at the unwelcome visitor. For 5 days, people across Earth had watched this giant ship. For 5 days, fear had spread like wildfire. Rick rubbed his tired eyes. At 42, he had spent 20 years preparing to defend Earth from all threats, but nothing had prepared him for this. "Sir, the aliens are calling again," said Susan Clark. The young lieutenant's fingers trembled slightly as she worked at her station. Rick turned from the window. The command center buzzed with activity. 50 of Earth's best officers worked at screens showing maps, data, and weapon systems. None of these systems seemed good enough now. "Show me," Rick said, walking to the main screen. The alien appeared immediately. General Kraz of the Valkyrie stood 7 feet tall. His blue skin was covered in tiny scales that shimmered under the lights of his ship. 4 yellow eyes blinked at different times. His mouth was wide and filled with teeth that looked like small knives. "Captain Martinez," the alien said, his voice made flat by the translation computer. "Have you decided to surrender your world to us?" Rick stood straight and kept his face calm. Inside, his heart pounded like a drum. "No, General. Earth will not surrender." The alien made a strange sound. The computer translated it as laughter, but it sounded like rocks grinding together. "Your weapons are toys to us," Kraz said. "We have studied them all. Your nuclear bombs, your laser systems, your pathetic space fleet. They are like a child's playthings." Around the command center, people shifted uncomfortably. Many looked down at their hands or screens. "Our scans show your technology is at least 300 years behind ours," Kraz continued. "We have destroyed 17 worlds with much better defenses than yours." Rick felt anger rising in his chest. Then why talk at all? Why not just attack? The 4 yellow eyes blinked in sequence. "We offer a chance for your people to live. Surrender, and your people will serve the Valkyrie Empire. Resist, and your cities will burn." "We've faced threats before," Rick said. "Humanity doesn't give up easily." "Not like this," Kraz said. His voice was colder now. "You have exactly 24 hours to change your mind. After that, we will destroy your 10 largest cities as a demonstration." The screen went black. For 30 seconds, nobody spoke. The only sounds were the soft beeps of computers and the hum of air systems. Paul Jackson, Rick's second in command and best friend since college, walked over. His dark skin was ashy with worry. "Rick, he's not wrong about our weapons. Our best missiles couldn't even dent that ship." "I know," Rick admitted. He looked around the room at the worried faces of his crew. "But I'm not ready to surrender our planet." The elevator doors at the back of the command center opened. Dr. Olivia Green hurried in, her red hair flying behind her. The chief scientist of the Defense Force carried a tablet computer and looked excited despite the situation. "Captain, I need to show you something," she called, waving him over to her station. Rick and Paul followed her to the science station, where complex graphs and energy readings filled the screens. "What am I looking at, Doctor?" Rick asked. "I've been studying the alien ship for days," Olivia said, her green eyes bright with discovery. "Yes, they have advanced technology. But look at these power readings." She pointed to a graph showing energy spikes and flows. "They're generating massive amounts of power, but most of it goes to their shields and weapons," she explained. "Their actual engine technology isn't as advanced as they want us to think." Paul leaned closer to the screen. "Are you sure about this?" "Positive," Olivia said. "And there's more. Their ship has a strange energy pattern. Every 8 hours, there's a small drop in their shield strength. It only lasts about 10 seconds, but it's there." Rick felt a small spark of hope. "Can we use this?" "Maybe," Olivia said. "But I need to run more tests, and I'll need help from the engineering team." Just then, alarms blared throughout the station. Susan's voice rang out. "Captain, the alien ship is launching smaller vessels." Rick rushed to the main screen. 5 small craft had detached from the mothership and were heading toward Earth. "Track them," he ordered. "Where are they going?" Susan worked her controls quickly. Trajectories suggest Beijing, New York, London, Moscow, and New Delhi. Arm all planetary defenses, Rick commanded. Prepare to fire. Wait, Olivia called. They're not attack ships. The energy signatures are all wrong. They're scanning probes. The small ships entered Earth's atmosphere, moving too fast for the defense systems to lock on. They didn't attack. Instead, they circled each city, emitting blue light beams that swept across buildings, streets, and defense installations. They're mapping our defenses, Paul said grimly. Rick nodded. And showing us they can reach our cities anytime they want. After 30 minutes, the probes returned to the mothership. The message was clear. The Valkyries could strike whenever they wished. Rick called an emergency meeting with his top officers in the war room. Around a large round table sat Paul, Olivia, Defense Coordinator Frank Miller, Strategy Officer Linda Powell, and Communications Chief Dan Reeves. We have less than 23 hours, Rick said. I need options. Frank, a former general with 40 years of military experience, shook his head. Our planetary defense grid can't touch that ship. We've run the simulations 100 times. What? About the orbital platforms, Linda asked. She was the youngest person at the table, but her mind for strategy was unmatched. The lasers would be like flashlights to them, Frank replied. Dan leaned forward. Captain, maybe we should consider evacuation plans for the targeted cities. 10 cities with over 100 million people combined, Paul said. Where would they go? How would we move them in less than a day? The room fell silent again. Rick turned to Olivia. Doctor, tell everyone what you found. As Olivia explained the energy patterns and shield fluctuations, Rick watched hope slowly return to his officers' faces. If we could hit them during one of these power dips, Linda said, we might be able to do some damage. With what? Frank asked. Even without shields, that hull would withstand our strongest weapons. Olivia bit her lip, thinking. What if we don't try to destroy the ship? What if we target their power systems instead? A precisely timed EMP burst might disrupt their systems long enough for us to make a real strike. Rick stood up, his mind racing. We need to make every second count. Olivia, work with engineering to modify our best EMP weapons. Linda, develop a strike plan that uses everything we've got. Frank, I want every defense system ready to fire the moment their shields drop. Dan, prepare a worldwide broadcast. I need to speak to Earth's leaders within the hour. As the team rushed to work, Rick stepped aside with Paul. Do you think we have a chance? Paul asked quietly. Rick looked at his friend. The Valkyries think they know everything about us. They've studied our weapons, our technology, our defenses. But they've missed something important. What's that? Rick's eyes hardened with determination. Throughout history, humans have always been at their most dangerous when cornered. And right now, our entire species is backed against the wall. For the first time since the alien ship arrived, Rick felt a real sense of purpose. The Valkyries might laugh at human weapons now, but they didn't understand the human spirit. And that would be their biggest mistake. 6 hours after the emergency meeting, a black helicopter landed on the roof of the defense station. Rick, Paul, and Olivia stepped out into the cold night air. A woman in a crisp military uniform waited for them. Her gray hair was cut short, and her face showed years of tough decisions. Captain Martinez, I'm Colonel Laura Peterson, she said, shaking Rick's hand firmly. We need to move quickly. Our transport is waiting. Transport to where? Rick asked. And why wasn't I told about this meeting? Laura's expression didn't change. All your questions will be answered soon. The group boarded a sleek aircraft unlike any Rick had seen before. It had no visible windows and hummed with a strange energy. Once they were strapped in, the craft rose silently into the air and shot forward at incredible speed. Where are we going? Paul asked, gripping his seat as the craft banked sharply. To our best chance of saving Earth, Laura replied. After 30 minutes of flight, they descended toward a mountain range. Rick recognized the jagged peaks of the Rocky Mountains. The craft slowed and hovered over what looked like an empty stretch of rock. Then, a section of the mountainside slid open, revealing a hidden entrance. The aircraft landed in a large cave. Armed guards stood at attention as the group stepped out. Laura led them through 5 security checkpoints. At each one, she placed her hand on scanners, looked into eye readers, and spoke passwords. "This place is locked down tighter than 40. Knox," Paul whispered to Rick. They entered a large elevator. As the doors closed, Laura finally began to explain. "Captain, what I'm about to show you has been kept secret from all but 20 people in the world," she said. "Project Artemis was started 15 years ago for one reason only: to defend Earth against hostile aliens." Rick stared at her. "You've been preparing for an alien invasion for 15 years? Why wasn't I told? I'm in charge of Earth's defense." "Need-to-know basis," Laura said simply. "The fewer people who knew, the better. Until 5 days ago, this was all just a precaution. Now it's our only hope." The elevator descended for nearly 2 minutes, going deep under the mountain. When the doors finally opened, Rick, Paul, and Olivia gasped in unison. They stepped into an enormous underground hangar, bigger than 5 football fields. Bright lights revealed 3 sleek spacecraft unlike anything on Earth. They were shaped like arrowheads with smooth black surfaces that seemed to swallow light. No visible engines or weapons could be seen, yet they radiated power. Workers in white lab coats moved around the ships, checking systems and making adjustments. "Meet the Artemis fighters," Laura said, pride filling her voice. "The most advanced weapons humans have ever built." "How?" Olivia asked, her scientific mind already racing. "This technology is beyond anything we have." Laura led them toward the nearest fighter. In 2037, a small alien craft crashed in the Arizona desert. It wasn't Valkyries. We still don't know who they were. The pilot died in the crash, but the ship was mostly intact. Rick looked at her in shock. "There was a previous alien contact and it was kept secret?" "It wasn't contact exactly," Laura explained. "Just a crashed scout ship. We've spent almost 20 years studying that technology and applying what we learned to these fighters." Olivia was already examining the nearest ship, her fingers hovering just above its surface. "This is incredible," she whispered. Her scientists' eyes saw things the others missed. "The metal isn't really metal, is it? It's some kind of adaptive material." "Very good, Doctor," Laura said with approval. "The outer skin can change its properties depending on outside conditions, but that's not the most important feature." She pressed her hand against a panel and a section of the ship slid open soundlessly. Inside was a cockpit with controls that looked surprisingly simple. "The Artemis fighters can phase shift," Laura explained. Paul frowned. "What does that mean, in plain English?" "It means," Laura said, "that these ships can slightly shift out of normal reality. Not completely, just enough to pass through energy shields like the ones protecting the Valkyries ship." "That's impossible," Olivia said, but her eyes showed she was already considering how it might work. "See for yourself," Laura said. She nodded to a technician who pressed several buttons on a control panel. A blue energy field appeared around a test dummy across the hangar. Laura lifted what looked like a remote control and pressed a button. The nearest fighter hummed softly, and a faint shimmer rippled across its surface. Then, it slowly moved forward through the energy field, as if it wasn't there. Rick, Paul, and Olivia watched with their mouths open. "How many pilots can fly these things?" Rick asked when he found his voice. "That's where we run into problems," Laura admitted. "The neural interface is complex. We have exactly 3 pilots who can operate them effectively." "Is that enough?" Paul asked. "It has to be," Laura replied. She led them to another section of the hangar. Behind a heavy security door was a large room containing a device about the size of a small car. It was cylindrical, with pulsing blue lights and several control panels. "This is the Prometheus device," Laura said. "It works with the fighters. This device can create a focused disruption field that will force the Valkyries ship's power systems to reset." Rick studied the device. "You're saying this can shut down their ship?" "Not completely," Laura explained. "But it will knock out their shields and weapons for about 30 seconds. During that time, the Artemis fighters can get inside their defenses and hit their power core." 30 seconds isn't much time," Paul said. doubt clear in his voice. "It's all we need," said a new voice. They turned to see a man approaching them. He was about 35, with short brown hair and intense eyes. He wore a tight-fitting flight suit with the Artemis logo on the chest. "This is Major Greg Lewis," Laura introduced him. "He's our lead pilot." Greg nodded to the group. "My team has been training for this mission for 7 years. We can execute the attack plan in 27 seconds. Rick studied the pilot carefully. "You believe this will work?" "I know it will," Greg said with absolute confidence. "We've run the simulation over 1,000 times." Rick looked around the hangar. For the first time since the alien ship appeared, he felt real hope. But doubt still nagged at him. If this technology is so advanced, why keep only 3 fighters? Why not build a fleet? Laura's face grew serious. "The materials needed are extremely rare. The power source is even rarer. We barely had enough to build these 3. "What's the power source?" Olivia asked. Laura hesitated. "We call it Element X. It was in the crashed alien ship. We've never found it on Earth." Rick took a deep breath and made his decision. "Show me the attack plan. We have less than 18 hours before the Valkyrex deadline." As Laura called up holographic displays showing the attack strategy, Rick felt the weight of humanity's future on his shoulders. Earth's best hope rested on 3 experimental fighters, a strange device, and a handful of brave pilots. It wasn't much. But sometimes, a small force with the element of surprise was all you needed to change the course of history. The countdown timer on the main screen of the defense station showed 3 hours remaining until the Valkyrex deadline. Rick stood at the command center, looking at the holographic display of Earth and the massive alien ship. The room was quiet, except for the soft beeping of computers and the occasional whispered conversation. Every person in the room knew what was at stake. If their plan failed, millions would die today, and that would be just the beginning. "Status report," Rick said, his voice steady despite his racing heart. Susan looked up from her station. "Artemis fighters are in position on the dark side of the moon. The Prometheus device is charged and ready." "All world governments have been informed of the plan," Dan added. "Military forces worldwide are on highest alert." Paul walked over to Rick and spoke quietly. "The evacuation of the target cities is only at 30%. There's not enough time to move everyone." Rick nodded grimly. They had done all they could with the limited time. Now everything depended on their desperate plan working. "Captain," Susan called suddenly, "the Valkyrex ship is moving. It's taking position over North America." Rick watched as the holographic display showed the alien vessel settling into a geostationary orbit over the middle of the United States. "They're early," Paul said, checking his watch. "We still have almost 3 hours." "They want to scare us," Rick replied. "Show the evacuation efforts and make people panic." As if on cue, the communication system lit up. "Incoming transmission from the Valkyrex ship." Rick straightened his uniform, put it on screen. General Kraz appeared, his 4 yellow eyes gleaming with confidence. "Captain Martinez, I decided to move up our timetable. Your species' pitiful evacuation attempts are amusing but pointless." Rick kept his face neutral, not showing any emotion. "We still have 3 hours according to your own deadline." Kraz made his grinding rocks laugh. "I've changed my mind. You have 30 minutes to announce your surrender or we begin our attack." Before Rick could respond, the alien cut the transmission. The command center erupted in worried voices. Rick held up his hand for silence. "This changes nothing," he said firmly. "Our plan remains the same. Contact Colonel Peterson and Major Lewis. Tell them we're moving up the schedule." Rick turned to Olivia, who stood at the science station monitoring the alien ship. "Doctor, will the power fluctuation still happen?" Olivia nodded, though her face was pale with tension. "Yes, the 8-hour cycle is consistent. The next drop in shield strength will occur in exactly 17 minutes. Then that's when we strike," Rick decided. He pressed a button on his communication device. "Colonel Peterson, this is Captain Martinez. The Valkyrex have moved up their timetable. We need to launch now." "Understood, Captain." Laura's voice replied. We're ready. The Prometheus device is being moved into position. In the hidden hangar beneath the Rocky Mountains, Major Greg Lewis and his two fellow pilots, Captain Andrea Barnes and Lieutenant Sam Rodriguez, climbed into their Artemis fighters. The neural interfaces hummed to life as they settled into their seats. Artemis 1 ready, Greg reported, his mind linking with the advanced systems of his fighter. Artemis 2 ready, Andrea confirmed. Artemis 3 ready, Sam added. Colonel Peterson stood in the control room, watching as technicians made final adjustments to the Prometheus device. The cylindrical machine had been loaded onto a special transport and was now being positioned in a mountain valley with a clear line of sight to the sky. Devices in final position, a technician reported. Energy levels optimal, Laura nodded. Activate targeting systems. Lock onto the Valkyrie ship. Back at the defense station, Rick watched as small icons representing the Artemis fighters appeared. On the tactical display, they were rising from their hidden base, moving quickly but staying in the shadow of the moon. Artemis Squadron is in position, Susan reported. Prometheus device is locked on target. Rick felt sweat on his forehead, but didn't wipe it away. Time to shield fluctuation? 12 minutes, Olivia answered, her eyes fixed on her instruments. Suddenly, an alarm blared. Susan's fingers flew over her control panel. Captain, the Valkyrie ship is deploying smaller vessels. At least 20 attack craft are launching. Rick watched in horror as the display showed small ships pouring from the mother ship like angry wasps from a nest. They're not waiting for their deadline, Paul said, his voice tight. They're attacking now. Where are they headed? Rick demanded. Multiple trajectories, Susan replied. Washington, D.C., New York, Los Angeles, Chicago. Alert all defense systems to engage, Rick ordered. But don't use everything. We need to save our main strike for when their shields drop. Around the world, anti-aircraft systems, fighter jets, and ground-based laser defenses activated. The small Valkyrie attack ships entered Earth's atmosphere, moving with incredible speed and agility. 8 minutes to shield fluctuation, Olivia called out. Rick opened a worldwide channel. All defense forces, this is Captain Martinez. Engage. The enemy craft, but conserve your primary weapons. I repeat, conserve your primary weapons. The main attack is yet to come. On screens around the command center, they watched as Earth's military forces engaged the alien attackers. Missiles streaked into the sky. Laser beams cut through clouds. The alien ships were hit multiple times, but seemed barely affected. Weapons are barely scratching them, Paul said, watching as a squadron of fighter jets was destroyed by a single alien craft. They're toying with us, Rick said grimly, showing us how helpless we are. 5 minutes to shield fluctuation, Olivia announced. Over the radio, they heard Greg's voice. Artemis Squadron ready to launch on your command, Captain. Hold position. Major, Rick ordered. Wait for my signal. Around the world, the first explosions began as alien weapons hit their targets. A government building in Washington erupted in flames. A bridge in New York collapsed. The death toll began to rise. 3 minutes, Olivia said, her voice shaking slightly. Rick opened a channel to Colonel Peterson. Laura, prepare to activate the Prometheus device on my mark. Ready, Captain, she replied. Her voice was calm, professional. Years of training had prepared her for this moment. 2 minutes. The Valkyrie's attacks intensified. More cities were hit. Defense systems were overwhelmed. It was beginning to look like the end of human civilization. 1 minute. Rick took a deep breath and steadied himself. Artemis Squadron, prepare to launch. All remaining Earth defenses, stand by to fire everything you have at the mothership on my command. 30 seconds. In the command center, no one spoke. Every eye was fixed on the screens, watching as their world burned and their last hope. Prepare to launch. 15 seconds. Greg, Andrea, and Sam activated their fighters' phase shift systems. The ships hummed with power as their surfaces began to shimmer slightly. 10 seconds. Colonel Peterson placed her hand on the activation control for the Prometheus device. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Now. Rick shouted. Colonel Peterson slammed her hand down on the control. The Prometheus device fired a brilliant beam of blue-white energy directly at the Valkyrex mothership. The beam struck the massive vessel and spread across its surface like lightning. "Shield fluctuation confirmed," Olivia shouted. "Their power systems are resetting." "Artemis Squadron, launch," Rick ordered. The 3 fighters shot out from behind the moon, their engines glowing with unearthly blue fire. They moved faster than any human craft had ever moved before, crossing the distance to the Valkyrex ship in seconds. "All Earth defenses fire at will," Rick commanded. Every remaining missile, laser, and weapon on Earth fired at once, all targeting the mothership. Most were still ineffective, but they served their purpose, distracting the Valkyrex from the real threat. The Artemis fighters, nearly invisible in their phase-shifted state, slipped through the weakened shields of the alien vessel. Following their carefully planned attack route, they flew directly to the ship's power core. "We're inside," Greg reported. "Targeting power systems. 20 seconds until their shields restore," Olivia warned. "Weapons hot," Andrea called. "Firing quantum torpedoes." "Target locked," Sam added. "Firing now." Each fighter launched 2 torpedoes at specific points in the Valkyrex power system. Then they banked sharply and raced back toward the shield boundary. 15 seconds. "Get clear," Rick ordered. The fighters pushed their engines to maximum speed, racing against time. They passed through the weakening shield boundary just as the torpedoes struck their targets inside the ship. 10 seconds. The first explosion was small, almost unnoticeable from Earth, but it triggered a chain reaction within the alien vessel. Secondary explosions rippled across its surface. 5 seconds. The Artemis fighters dove back toward Earth as the Valkyrex shields snapped back on, trapping the explosions inside the ship and magnifying their power. A blinding flash of light filled the sky. The command center's view screens automatically darkened to protect everyone's eyes. When they cleared, the Valkyrex ship was still there, but it was badly damaged. Nearly half of it had been torn away, and fires burned throughout its structure. A cheer erupted in the command center. People hugged each other, some crying with relief and joy. "Direct hit," Susan shouted over the noise. "Their weapon systems are offline. Primary power is down." Rick allowed himself a small smile as he opened a communication channel to the damaged alien ship. For 5 long minutes, General Kraz didn't respond to Rick's message. The command center remained silent as everyone watched the damaged Valkyrex ship drifting in orbit. Emergency lights flickered across its broken hull. Pieces of metal and debris floated around it like a cloud. "Are they preparing another attack?" Paul asked quietly. Rick shook his head. "Their weapons are offline. They're running on backup power. I think they're in shock." Finally, the communication screen flickered to life. General Kraz appeared, but he looked very different now. His command center was dark, lit only by emergency lights. Smoke filled the background. Several injured Valkyrex moved behind him, trying to repair damaged systems. "Captain Martinez," Kraz said. His voice was quieter now, without its earlier arrogance. "How did you do this? Your weapons were supposed to be primitive." Rick stood tall. "We kept our best technology hidden, General. Humans have learned through many wars that surprise is a powerful weapon." Kraz stared at Rick for a long moment. Then he did something unexpected. He raised his hand in what looked like a salute. "The EPI, Valkyrex High Command, is reassessing the situation," he said carefully. "We request a temporary ceasefire while we make repairs to our life support systems. Many of my crew are injured." Rick looked at Paul, who nodded slightly. "We will allow your medical ships to assist your crew," Rick said. "But any aggressive move will be met with immediate force." After the communication ended, cheers broke out across the command center. People hugged each other and cried with relief. Earth had won its first battle against an alien invader. Rick raised his hands for quiet. "This isn't over yet," he reminded everyone. "The Valkyrex have more ships. We need to be ready for whatever comes next." 3 days later, Rick sat in a large conference room in Washington, D.C. Around the table sat world leaders, military commanders, and scientific advisors. President Eleanor Davis sat at the head of the table, her face serious but hopeful. The reports from around the world show relatively low casualties, thanks to the early evacuation efforts, she said. But the Valkyrex attack still killed over 2,000 people and caused billions in damage. What about the Valkyrex fleet beyond Mars? Asked the British Prime Minister. Are they preparing to attack? Colonel Laura Peterson, who had been monitoring space activity, shook her head. Actually, they're retreating. Our long-range sensors show their ships moving away from our solar system. Surprised murmurs filled the room. They're running away? The Chinese president asked skeptically. Not exactly, said a new voice. All heads turned as a Valkyrex entered the room. Unlike General Kraz, this alien wore robes instead of armor. He was escorted by human security officers but didn't seem like a prisoner. President Davis stood. This is Ambassador Torek from the Valkyrex High Command. He arrived 2 hours ago requesting to speak with Earth's leaders. Rick studied the alien carefully as he moved to the front of the room. Torek was older than Kraz, with lighter blue skin and signs of age around his 4 eyes. Leaders of Earth, Torek began, his translator making his clicks and whistles into smooth English. I bring a message from our High Command that may surprise you. The room waited in tense silence. The Valkyrex Empire wishes to offer Earth an alliance. For several seconds, no one spoke. Then the room erupted in confused questions. President Davis raised her hand for silence. Ambassador, 3 days ago your forces tried to destroy our cities. Now you want an alliance? You must understand our skepticism. Torek made a gesture with his 4-fingered hands that might have been agreement. I do understand. Let me explain something about Valkyrex culture that may help. For thousands of years, my people have believed that only through combat can we truly know another species. He paused, looking around the room. We have conquered 17 worlds, but in each case we have eventually incorporated those species into our empire, not as slaves but as partners. You attacked us to test us? Rick asked, unable to hide his anger. Yes, Torek admitted. We study a world's visible technology and defense systems. Then we attack with enough force to overwhelm those systems. If a species surrenders, they become workers in our empire. If they fight and lose, they become soldiers. But if they surprise us, he turned his yellow eyes directly to Rick. If they show innovation and courage beyond what we expected, they become equals. And that's what happened here? President Davis asked. Indeed, Torek said. Your hidden weapons program, your phase shift technology, the way you exploited our shield fluctuation. No species has defeated a Valkyrex dreadnought in over 300 years. Dr. Olivia Green, who had been quiet until now, leaned forward. The phase shift technology. You've seen it before, haven't you? Torek made his grinding rocks laugh, but it sounded friendlier now. Very perceptive, Doctor. Yes, the ship that crashed on your world in 2037 was a scout from the Silvani, one of our oldest allies. Their phase technology has always been their greatest achievement. A week later, Rick stood in the hangar of the defense station, watching as Valkyrex engineers worked alongside human technicians. They were installing new technology into Earth's defense systems. General Kraz himself supervised the work. His attitude toward humans completely changed. Your Prometheus device, Kraz said as Rick approached. Our scientists have been studying it. The principles it uses were abandoned by our researchers centuries ago. We thought that approach was too unpredictable. Humans like unpredictable, Rick said with a small smile. It gives us more options. Kraz made a clicking sound that Rick now recognized as thoughtful consideration. In all our conquests, Captain Martinez, few species have earned our respect as quickly as humans. You use simple tools but apply them with remarkable creativity. A stick can be a powerful weapon in the right hands, Rick replied. Indeed. Kraz gestured to the activity around them. This alliance will change the balance of power in the galaxy. There are threats out there that even the Valkyrex fear. Greg Lewis walked up to them, now wearing a new uniform with both human and Valkyrex symbols. Captain, the first joint training mission is ready to launch. Human pilots will be flying alongside Valkyrex pilots. I never thought I'd see that happen, Rick admitted. Life is full of surprises, Greg said with a grin. Dr. Olivia Green rushed into the hangar, her face bright with excitement. Captain, the Valkyrex scientists are showing us their quantum propulsion systems. We could reach Alpha Centauri in days. Instead of years, and what are we showing them? Rick asked. Everything from music to literature, Olivia said happily. They find human art fascinatingly chaotic, and they're particularly interested in our history of creative problem-solving. Later that day, Rick stood at the large window of the station, looking down at Earth. The blue planet seemed more precious than ever now. A reflection appeared in the glass beside him. Paul had joined him. Quite a week, Paul said quietly. Rick nodded. From facing extinction to joining a galactic alliance, not bad for 7 days' work. Do you trust them? Paul asked, watching, as a Valkyrex ship glided past the station. Not completely, Rick admitted. But Colonel Peterson and the intelligence team think this is genuine. The Valkyrex need allies as much as we do. Who would have thought, Paul mused, that our greatest achievement would be getting beaten up by aliens? Rick laughed. It wasn't getting beaten that impressed them. It was hitting back when they thought we couldn't. As the Earth turned below them, city lights began to glow on the night side of the planet. Humanity had faced its greatest challenge and survived. More than survived. They had earned respect among the stars. The Valkyrex had laughed at human weapons, but they weren't laughing anymore. Instead, they were learning an important lesson. Never underestimate a species that had spent its entire history overcoming impossible odds with creativity and courage. As Rick watched a joint fleet of human and Valkyrex ships practicing maneuvers against the backdrop of the moon, he knew humanity's adventures among the stars were just beginning, and this time, no one would underestimate them again.